Hello there, I am Man in Yellow and welcome to the third part of the guide series. I just made myself a massive serving of nachos and cheese, so now I am very much ready to make some videos. I'll probably also do some arena after this. Today we will be talking about understanding the value of keys, and we will be looking at a couple of games, but first off I just want to go through a very quick example here with taking panic points with a 1 key. So we have two different examples here. And we're going to start with the bottom one actually. In this example you can see that the middle point on this map, this is center stage by the way, I've just destroyed some obstacles on it. The middle point of this map right now is not captured by anyone, it is completely offline. So player 2 over here now takes this point with their tickles. The tickles dies and it's replaced by a boom. It's of course killed by a stabby right here. And then the unicorn kills the boom, because that makes sense to do. And what you can see happen here is that both players are losing a 1 key because both boom and the tickles are dying, of course. But player 1 ends up holding the panic point at the end. And that is because player 2 started out by taking a point that had not been captured yet. And that is a very bad idea to do. Whereas in the top example here, you will see that player 2 takes the top point here, which was already the opponent's. Then their Phobie is killed, of course, and is replaced by a Razor Mouth from player 1, which also dies. So in this example, both players have also lost a 1 key, but in the end, the panic point is the same. Whereas in this down here, they lost a point essentially, or they gave a point to the opponent, while still being even in keys. And this is like very important to keep notice of. This essentially just means you never want to take one of these points if it means that your Phobie will die. Almost never. Saying never is like, there's probably some rare situation where you could do it, but you almost never want to take a point that has not been captured yet if it means that your Phobie will die while doing it. Unless you're like having 3 points at the same time or something like that. But if you're only capturing 1 point, don't do that. If you instead take this up here, you end up going even on keys and the panic point will stay the same, assuming that they trade back with a 1 key, of course. So that is a lot better to do. Now that said, you probably shouldn't be trading 1 keys too much. That is often a mistake that players make, where they just sit back and trade 1 keys over and over again, and you never really get anywhere, because as you can see, every time you trade a 1 key away, they will trade a 1 key away and they will keep the point. Like the first player that captured the point will keep on having the point. So it's never correct to do that when you are behind, pretty much. You want to recapture multiple points, or you want to threaten the enemy Phobies. Those are like the things that you have to do. But in case that you do trade panic points by just throwing away 1 keys, make sure that you take ones that have not been captured. Or that have been captured. Make sure you don't take ones that have not been captured, is what I mean. That is a very important thing to do, because otherwise you will just make the problem worse and worse and worse for yourself. So don't be player 2 down here or example 2 down here. Be the top example if you're doing that. Sometimes it can be okay to trade 1 keys if you know exactly what thing you're going for and you just want to drain the resources of the opponent a little bit. But that's like another discussion entirely. Next up, we are going into a couple game examples. In the first one here we have Circulatum, or whatever, I don't know if that's the correct way of pronouncing it, I'm just gonna call them Circo. And we have Raptor. Now in this game they end up making a mistake which very quickly ends the game, but that is not what we are looking at here. We are looking at the first couple turns here. So Circo takes with double 1 keys. This is because he wants to go for either Inoculus or Ginsting. Both of those choices are very common and very good on this map. So that is a pretty common opener, going with double 1 key. Here we see a fairly aggressive response with a lot of power. They are split into 3 different units with their 4 keys, so that gives them a lot of bodies and a lot of stats for the keys they spend. We see the Inoculus come out here, that is of course expected. And so far they have not traded any keys. They have just like taken points. And this is all going as like you would expect, because player 1 starts a key down, so they often get to take a point for free. Here they have 2 points and player 2 has 1 point. So that is pretty much exactly how the game often goes. At least on some maps. We see Raptor save here for 6 keys. This usually either means Hematic, Puff, Attractor, stuff like that. Because 6 keys is a very good spot to go to. There are a lot of very powerful Phobies there. We end up seeing the Attractor here, which is great on this map because like there are 2 Abyss tiles down here where you can insta-kill enemies if they drop into. So that Phobie makes a lot of sense on this map. You see it pretty often here. Now this next turn is where things get interesting. Because Circo is going to go over here and they're going to kill the cowbell while taking a point. And then they're going to summon an aggressive unit here. Which turns out to be Puff. Now, this is extremely good. This is a very good invade and it's a very good trading of keys. What you can see here is that this ends up, of course, killing this 1 key down here. So, say Raptor somehow kills this 1 key, Circo would have taken a point and he would have killed the 1 key while losing 1 key. So he would already be going ahead from that because he would be taking a point and he would be going even on keys, which is something that you very much like to do. Or if you can be even better and, you know, you can like not go even but have an advantage in keys while also taking points, that's even better obviously. But this is a very good thing to do. If you can take a point while killing something that is while losing one of your Phobies that is of equal value, that's good. Of course, everyone will look here and say, oh, but he's gonna kill the Inoculus right now. Because he can go over here, he can pull it, he can hit it with the Unicorn, and then jar cannon it probably, which I believe is also what happens. But if they do that, because of this Puff here being summoned, okay, that just completely covered the screen. Because of the Puff here, that is also going to be pulled in near the Attractor, and then their Attractor will likely die. So that ends up being a bad trade for Raptor here, which they are kind of forced to do. Because if they try to kill this thing, they will just take a bunch of free damage from this and probably lose their Unicorn. And if they just back off, they will have lost all of the panic points and they will have lost the 1 key. And both of those are just completely losing spots. Like, there's no chance of you winning if you do that. So they end up actually killing the Inoculus here, which is what you would expect to happen. Now, I do think they should probably have moved up with this thing to hit something, or moved it down here just to be aggressive or something, but that's a minor detail. So, of course, this is going to be killing the Attractor here, with probably the help of either a Snowball or a Jar Cannon or something like that. I believe it's a Jar Cannon, but I don't quite remember. Yeah, it's just a Jar Cannon. That makes a lot of sense to do. Circo is also going to go in and start hitting stuff here. And you can see now, they have lost a 4 key, and Raptor has lost a 6 key and a 1 key, because this is dead. So that is a very bad trade for Raptor, and all of that came from this aggressive movement that Circo did up here. Which was very, very nice. Of course, Raptor tries to kill the Puff here, but he can't. They probably forget about the fact that fire doesn't work on Abyss tiles. I'm guessing that's what happened, or maybe they just ran out of time or something. There wasn't any way for them to ever kill this, and if they had gone on kills on, like gone for a kill on this and then backed off, they would have probably also lost. So like at this point the game is already pretty much over, and all of it just like came from this 1 turn back here, where they went in with the Inoculus and Cowbell to kill this Phobie while summoning a large flying thing. However, I should mention, this could also just have well been like Murder Wing or Tooth Fairy, and he would still have been able to kill the Attractor here and then probably summoned multiple units after that, or maybe he would have had a turret or something instead. They just chose to go with the Puff here because Puff is a very good Phobie, and flyers are, like, out of the flyers in the game, it's one of the better ones, one of the best ones actually. So that makes a lot of sense. But what I really wanted to highlight was this up here, where they go in and they take a point while going even in keys if the Cowbell dies, and if they go for the Inoculus they will be up in keys. So that is a very, very good invade that ends up trading keys back and forth in a way that is very positive for Circo. Next up we will look at a game from, was it Ryuk? I think they were called that, yeah, Ryuk. I'm just gonna call them Ryuk because I don't know how you would say I can say the full name like that. That would be weird. I believe it was one of the bottom games. It was against someone named Wizard or something. I found a decent game there, I think. Did I already scroll over it or something? I feel like I did. I think it was near the bottom, wasn't it? Hopefully they haven't played. Yeah, they didn't play enough for it to go away. It was right there. So this is also a pretty interesting game, because this is a game where we will see that Ryuk trades 2 keys, or maybe it was even more. I can't quite remember right now, but they traded some of their keys to get an advantage in tempo here, without actually killing any of the opponent's thing, and that eventually led to Wizard Gap here having to sacrifice their Phobies and move in a very awkward way, which lost them the game. This ends up being pretty close, but it was still a pretty good move that they did, so I just wanted to highlight that. We're just going to skip through the first couple turns here. This is actually an interesting thing where Ryuk took the middle point here with Gravedigger. Of course, he killed or destroyed the obstacle, then went here. And Wizard ends up destroying an obstacle also and going in and poisoning with the Henrietta. I actually do not think this is worth it. They are spending a key here to put a big poison or long-lasting poison on the Gravedigger. However, this is gonna take so long to actually kill the Gravedigger that, like, by the time it's gonna have done any actual damage to it, the Gravedigger will have gotten so many turns that it will probably have fought or done something else. So I do not think this is worth it at all. I think it would have been much better for... I'm just gonna call them Gap, actually. I think it would have been much better for them to try and take some points or something like that. They could have taken this point down here with their Henrietta and then maybe destroyed this up here, and the next turn they could have tried to go for this maybe, or on one of the following turns with the Henrietta, instead of just sacrificing it to get a small poison on their Gravedigger. It would be another story if this was Sargassum, of course, because that lasts like no turns at all and deals almost the same poison damage. So here we just see some points being captured, some units being summoned, skipping ahead a little bit again. And now Wizard summoned a very, very big phobie here in Hematic. And that is pretty smart to do on this map, because you end up fighting in these small gaps here. So often there are jar cannons, and then there's one strong unit, maybe with an Inoculus behind it, that is trying to force its way through like one of these paths to do a lot of damage. But what we end up seeing here is that Wizard will go in and just hit. They go in here with all of their phobies and they just hit this with a big AoE that also hits the cassowary, of course, and they set up a murder wing to be dangerous for the jar cannon, which makes a lot of sense. And now comes the interesting turn here, because normally you would see a lot of players hit the Hematic once and then back off and like reinforce their 2 panic points up here, maybe bring a big unit because they have 6 keys, right? Maybe they could even have banked for something larger. That is a very common thing to do, and I think that's what most players would probably have done here. But Ryuk actually does something different here, which I really like. They go extremely aggressive. They just straight up send it at this Hematic, and they are already very ahead in panic points, as you can see. Well, not very, but they have 2 panic points here, and Wizard is forced to like go in here to take points, and they're not really in a position where they can easily take either of these. So that means that this like forces them back, and then they have to go like back here and heal, and they have to sit down here and wait for a bit and stuff like that. And that just means that Ryuk has a ton of time to like set up a good board position, maybe take this point back to be annoying, stuff like that, or even just threaten Wizard. This of course means that they end up losing the cassowary, and I believe they actually also lose the what's it called, Temptress, but they lose that to Gravedigger dying, so that's a very good trade for them. But the cassowary is like pretty much a sacrifice here that just goes in to deal some damage to the Hematic and force it to back out again. And due to the Klepto sitting here, Wizard cannot stay here. Like they will die if they stay anywhere near here. There's not really a choice to stay here. So they essentially traded this cassowary to force Wizard back from the map. Of course, we see here, this is actually what I would call a very bad trade, because they go in here with the Gravedigger and they kill the Temptress. And if we just look at the units here, Gravedigger is full health, and it also, I believe, has its ability up. And Temptress, on the other hand, has 500 health, not even. And that's just not worth it. Like, if we had to talk about their worth, this is probably worth 1.5 keys. You could maybe make it like maybe 2 keys, but probably only 1.5. Whereas this is still worth 3 keys. So this is a very bad trade in my opinion to take, and this puts Wizard Gap very far behind. I think it would have been way better if they just didn't kill that. They of course also bring a clinical out to heal their Hematic here, because the Hematic is probably the win condition. And again here we see Ryuk doing a very aggressive and tempo-oriented play. They bring Snowball here and hit the Gravedigger, and that means that they can go up here with the Klepto and get a free hit on the Murderwing. It does also mean that Wizard can go in and kill this Gravedigger with the Murderwing and either the Hematic or the Bowmangles, depending on which one they want, but that would end up with this dying and whichever unit that goes here taking a lot of damage, so that's actually good for Ryuk. They end up going up here to hit this Klepto also. That makes a decent amount of sense to do. And they also bring a Tickles, which is pretty scary. Now at this point you can see, okay, we're just gonna let this Bowmangles be summoned. At this point you can see that Wizard is in a very rough situation, because they kind of have to recap these points soon. If we just look at their heart, they have 2,800 health left. Eventually they will need to recapture these points, but they kind of have to do it with a 1 key over 2 turns, and that will leave them vulnerable to Ryuk just going in and fighting with them. What I believe they end up doing is they bring a 1 key and then they take both of these points at the same time, which does make some amount of sense, but it's still a pretty rough situation to be in here. Also, I believe that Bowmangles should have been up here. That would have made more sense. But that's not really what we're going on about here. So they bring a 1 key here to take this point because Ryuk has no keys left, so they can't really use something to sacrifice onto this. They can't put a 1 key out and then kill this with the 1 key. Which means that Wizard gets to do this where he moves in and takes all of the points, so he's no longer behind on the board. Of course this dies just to take the points. And then we see the Tickles up here not quite die, because it's actually tanky enough that it does not die. It's pretty tanky for 3 keys still. And I would probably have put the Snowball back here. But what we see here is that this has to go poison or disease something right here. It could have just as well been poison. It would be the same thing here. And it's probably going to go onto this because that's the biggest unit. So that makes a lot of sense. And the rest of the game is essentially just them fighting very much here. We see that Ryuk goes in and kills the Electric Cat with the, I believe it's the Jar Cannon they used for it. And then they move up here and also hit with that Klepto, because they are very much on the clock right now. This is dying over multiple turns and there's a healer that will be up soon. They have to fight as much as possible right now. Also, I believe they probably could have hit this with the Jar Cannon or this with the Jar Cannon instead, which would have been way better, because they have the AoE coming in there, but that's a small mistake. So here at the end, it's just trading back and forth. This ends up dying. They have to go for this because this is dying on its own, so they can't really focus it. And this is not gonna just straight up die. I mean, they could have killed it by hitting twice here and then moving in here, but then they are either the Bowmangles or the or the Hematic would have died, and we would have ended up with the same thing. So this is essentially just a game gone. Ended up being fairly close, but it all snowballed from that turn where Ryuk essentially spent some of his keys to gain tempo, which is another thing you can do. Anyway, those were the 2 only games I had really thought about looking at. So in short, my points for this are just, first of all, do not take a panic point that has not been captured yet, if you can take a panic point that the opponent is currently owning with your 1 keys. Second off, if you can capture points without losing your Phobies, that is often very good to do during the early games. That's all that you're doing most of the time. And then while you are trading with Phobies, you want to do equal trades while taking points. or you want to do, you know, advantage trades where you like kill something that is more worth than what you're going to lose, of course. It can sometimes be worth it to go in with a higher key phobie to kill a lower key phobie if you take points while doing it. So like you invade and you kill like 1 or 2 of their things. Maybe let's say you kill things for 3 keys and you're going to lose 4 keys because your Jin's thing will die. That might be worth it if you're taking 2 points. That is also pretty important to remember. In the later stages of the game, sacrificing 1 keys is not nearly as good most of the time because you want them to fight with instead. Unless the opponent is dying from hard damage, it's often better to just go for something stat heavy or just something that fights well or is flexible like a snowball, and then try to kill the opponent's units instead of like trying to take points back when the opponent is just going to fight you, because then you're just throwing away your power essentially. And then lastly, you can like do invades where you don't actually kill something if it gives you enough tempo or if it sets up kills like you saw there. Those are like the important things to remember when going in, but most of the time you just want to make sure that when you're fighting your opponent, you are in a position where you will be able to kill more of their keys than they will be able to kill of yours. That's really like the most important thing to remember. So don't go in and pull in a Jin's thing with your Miss Muffet if the Muffet is going to die. That does not make any sense. Maybe if it takes a point that can be okay, but like that's still not that good. Anyway, if you have any questions or if I missed something for this, feel free to leave a comment, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.